Okay, hello and welcome to episode 9 of Radio Europa. It's me, Will, your host tonight. I'm here with Darth from Scotland.
Hi, mate.
Hi there, and we're just going to do a brief chat tonight about a couple of issues that have been quite important lately. Obviously, Tommy Robinson, which everybody's talking about, and then we're going to chat briefly about Sharia Courts as well, and something that's been in the news lately. So. If I just hand over to you, Darth, do you want to just sort of give a bit of context to the Tommy Robinson situation?
Yeah, so Tommy Robinson was released from prison the other day. For those of you that don't know, he was arrested a couple of months ago he was arrested under a breach of the peace. It then came out that he was he was arrested under contempt of court. This was due to a clause in his release agreement from prison last time, and if he breached that clause, he would basically be recalled to prison. So that was what he was arrested for. He has come out since being released. And he's done a couple of interviews. He did an interview with Tucker Carlson, and he basically spoke about being in solitary confinement for up to 23 hours a day for 2 months. He expressed the fact that he was subjected to threats constantly by other inmates, and he was also put in the highest Muslim population prison in the UK. He basically made the decision that he couldn't eat the food within the prison that was served by other prisoners because, again, it was mainly Muslim population. So he had to eat a very small amount of food every day by buying it with his very small amount of money that he was allowed to spend. And as a result, I think he lost in the region of £40 by the time he came out of prison.
Yeah, I mean, he's painted quite a dire picture of his time in prison since he's been out. And like you said, he did that interview with Fox. I think what I found interesting was when he did come out and he was given the opportunity to be interviewed by, I think it was the BBC, as he was leaving the prison. And even though, it could have been a chance to get his take out to the public, he deliberately chose not to because of the way the BBC behave. And I think anybody that sees that clip it starts to bring home the seriousness of censorship and the way, not so much censorship, but the way the media shape a narrative in this country, because he felt that despite the ordeal that he couldn't speak to the BBC. I don't know what you think about this, but to me it struck me as, with everything that's gone on and it's all coming to light, and with social media, it doesn't matter who he talks to, the information will get out there. It struck me as possibly something of a watershed moment for censorship, or rather narrative forming in this country. And maybe that from now on, the state will feel less inclined to lock people up under draconian gagging orders. What do you think about that? Do you agree there?
I think the main problem is Tommy Robinson is so, politically incorrect in the eyes of the establishment that they are simply willing to go not quite the full 9 yards, but not far off the 9 yards for silencing his views. Obviously, we have a large and growing population of Muslims in this country. And he, speaks out against. He actively speaks out against the more radical parts of Islam, and he says that he's against the extreme of Islam, and he has friends who are Muslim. But the public and the media, they don't want to hear that. All they want to portray him as is just he's anti-Muslim. So obviously we're now borderline running, not quite under a Muslim state, but you can't really criticize Muslims anymore. You can't criticize the religion of Islam in this country, and as was shown in Australia with Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux, you can't criticise Islam in Australia and other, so-called Western countries. So it would seem from what's come out in the press that the court case was very botchly done. The argument I think that Tommy Robinson's lawyer made was that the court process was incorrectly carried out, and as a result, he wasn't given a fair trial. Now, Tommy Robinson has said himself that he doesn't actually know what he did wrong. Again, it was said that he was in contempt of court, but his argument was all he was doing was reading out an article, I think it was by The Guardian or the BBC, about this Muslim rape gang that was being put on trial, and he was arguing, well, anybody had access to that article, and therefore how was he in contempt of court, and how was he influencing the jury and other members of the court by reading that out when they had access to that in the first place? It's possible they'll argue, well, he's a very, very anti-Muslim individual, and therefore he's more likely to exaggerate on the points that were on the article. But again, it's embarrassing for the state in the sense that he's been released from prison after 2 months. But I don't know. It's hard to say. There's these incidents like with Count Dankula. There's these kind of standoff alone instance right now in law, but if they become more regular, it's possible that the court trials will be harsher on people who criticise or who are very politically incorrect. I don't know if you agree with that or what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think it could go one or two ways in that respect. It could go that way, or I mean, the position I've been more inclined to believe, maybe it's out of a futile optimism more than anything, is that as these cases become more public and people like Tommy, public figures, and I think because there was Lauren and Stefan in Australia, but I think Blair Cottrell was also in the courtroom for it as well. And I think as these cases go viral on Twitter and Facebook and whatnot more regularly, it could start to, and I think it did with Tommy, it starts to awaken that typically British sense of fair play where people think, hang on a minute, it's not quite right that somebody's being sent to prison for essentially just doing their civic duty. So I think in that respect, it could work in our favour in terms of breaking down some of those censorship barriers. But yeah, I mean, like you said with Tommy, I think because there were 2 points, weren't there, on his trial? There was the fact that the due process wasn't necessarily followed because it was run through so quickly through the court, and also that he didn't do, because the BBC, liars that they are, they tried to make out that Tommy Robinson was filming the jurors and posting their identities, but like you said, he wasn't. He was just reading out an article. But he was filming in the vicinity of the court, so it could be the case that the future judge decides actually he didn't commit a crime in the first place. So
I mean, I might be wrong, but it's my understanding that the court was already in session by the time he was filming. Again, I may be wrong on that. I don't know if that's the case. The other thing, like kind of what you're saying about these incidents are becoming more and more kind of covered by the media, is obviously, I'm sure you guys are aware, you've got Paul Joseph Watson, you've got Count Dankula, and you've got Sargon of Akkad. They've all joined UKIP, and it's brought UKIP's numbers up by quite an amount just by them joining, and they have a huge reaching audience. So I reckon if I don't know whether it would happen or not, and I don't think he is. I quickly checked there. If Tommy Robinson joined UKIP, I reckon that would it would make it very difficult then for them to, keep him down as a, as a bigot and as a hater of the Muslim faith or Islam as a whole. Yeah, I mean, his support is growing by the day, and the support against the establishment and the mainstream media is growing by the day. So it could be very interesting what's going to happen in the next couple of months to the next year.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting point about UKIP, because once somebody's a member of a political party that's considered not respectable, but respectable enough to win 4 million votes like UKIP did, they've got that protection. And it's kind of like, because the state doesn't want to be seen to be actively persecuting opposition parties, because that's still quite taboo in this country to do that. And I know that obviously Gerard Batten, the UKIP leader, took up the cause, and I think Lord Pearson? Who?
Yeah, it was. I think he was the one that Tommy Robinson interviewed on his page. I think he did about a 40-minute interview with him on his YouTube page. Yeah,
that's it. So when with people like that, like MEPs and lords and whatever, who are taking up the cause under the banner of a political party, it sort of formalizes the whole thing and makes it a bit more difficult because people won't just forget. So I think, that's. It's definitely an interesting development, and time will tell. Time will tell what will happen there. But I do hope that I'm right, and that it does start to chip away at these gagging laws, if you like. Shall we move on and talk about the Sharia Courts?
Go for it.
So now I'm coming into this a bit blind, so I'm not up to speed on the latest development with this. So Darth, you're going to have to fill the readers and me in on what's going on here.
So there was an article released on the Independent 2 days ago, whereby the article headline says, "Judge says finding over one couple's circumstances does not cover all Islamic marriages in the UK." But effectively, what was happened was, this couple who had been considered married outside of the UK under Sharia law were subsequently considered to be married by British standards. Where was it? They were both married in 1998. The ceremony carried out by an imam, witness and host in front of guests, and the High Court found that the couple later managed to obtain a marriage certificate that enabled them to live and work in Dubai, and state authorities in England treated them as husband and wife. They had 4 children before their relationship fell apart in 2016. Miss Akhtar applied for a divorce, but her husband defended it by claiming their marriage was in Sharia law only and not valid under English law. Mr. Justice Williams concluded that although the marriage was quotes, entered into in disregard of certain requirements, it could not legally be declared a non-marriage and was covered by English law. So effectively what they're saying is that the court is recognising Sharia law or Sharia marriage as a marriage recognised by British law. Now that might seem like quite a small thing in the grand scheme, but it's one of these things, it's the trickle effect. Once one instance happens in Sharia law, people can turn around and say, well, the courts okay this instance of Sharia law, so why should they deny any other part of the law in Britain? And I think it's just one of these things where there could potentially be an opening of the floodgates, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and just as you were saying that, that did sound quite alarming to me, because as most people, especially British people listening, will know that British law works by precedent for the most part. It's something is set in law when there's a precedent set in a courtroom. So that, in theory, if you take that to its logical conclusion, that sets a precedent that things ratified in Sharia law can be retroactively approved by British common law, because it was in that instance. So, I wonder how far they would take it. So a Sharia court absolves a man of beating his wife or 3 wives or whatever, and does a British court, it makes it more difficult for them to turn around and penalise the culprit for that when they've already approved something that was outside of the realm of British law. So, I might be missing a legal point here, but I think that is the worry, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is the establishment would appear to be terrified of upsetting people of Islamic faith. I mean, back to I don't know whether you've watched the video or not, William, but there was a video on YouTube. It was on, I think it was Lauren Southern's account, and she is walking down the street with her film crew and is stopped by an inspector at the local city's police, and he basically was informed that she was probably going to be heading down to the local mosque.
Oh yeah.
And he basically threatens her and says, if you go down to that mosque, you may cause a breach of the peace, and you may therefore be committing a crime. And she was saying, well, I'm just going down there. I'm not. Why? How am I going to be committing a breach of the peace? I'm not planning on causing any disruption. And he's like, no, but your presence may cause them to become riled up, and therefore you may be causing a breach of the peace.
Right.
By your mere presence. And you could see him. You could see he was very, very worried about this prospect. And she said at one point, "Well, you're advising me not to go down. You're strongly advising me, but do I have the legal right to walk down there?" And there was this big long hesitation. Then he said, "Not at this time."
Right.
And I'm no expert on Australian law, but I have a funny feeling that what he said there was not a law, and was more like he was terrified to the point of desperation, and basically said, no, you don't have the right to walk down there, you don't have the legal right to walk down there. And if that is happening in another country which has, I believe, laws kind of built on English common law, what are the chances of that happening here in situations like this?
Well, it's quite probable, and I think you're right. The police in either Britain or Australia don't have the power to. I don't believe they have the power to say, we think you might commit a crime, or you might cause somebody else to commit a crime, therefore we're going to restrict your civil liberties in case this potential eventuality happens. I mean, unless it's some high risk event like a football game or an organised rally, I didn't think that any police force really had the power to do things like that.
I mean, the issue that people keep highlighting is if she walked down to if she walked down to a local church and did planning on doing exactly the same thing, nobody would have batted an eyelid. And I just think to myself, if we're going down this route of you cannot criticize a religion, you can't criticize any religion. Either you have it where you can't criticize any religion, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and all the others, or you have it where you can criticize all religions, which Christianity has been criticized for decades, hundreds of years now. Christianity is an open joke to a lot of people. A lot of comedians use Christianity as one of the lines of jokes. And I think religions should be criticized when they are at fault. To go right back to the Dark Ages was one of the reasons why we were in the Dark Ages was because of the church. The church was, tyrannical against the population and probably stopped a lot of technological developments like Galileo. And the church was rightly criticised for that kind of thing. But you cannot criticise Islam, it seems, in the Western world. And there is definitely a two-tier a two-tier law system developing in this country, and not for the better. And it worries me how far it's going to go before somebody says, no, enough is enough, this has to stop.
Yeah, and I think to take it back to the initial point about the Sharia courts, I guess, because that's a tenet of Sharia law, that essentially you can't poke fun at or criticize the religion. So you could have instances where Sharia courts issue, I don't know, what do they call it, a fatwa or something against some author or comedian for taking the piss out of their religion, and then what do the British courts do? Do they say, oh, well, actually, no, we're going to uphold our values? Or do they say, oh, yeah, we uphold your right to shut these people up? And it's we do have that two-tier, a marked two-tier system whereby, if you're a native, then you have to be selective about what you critique. But if you're a Muslim, or any foreigner really, but mostly a Muslim, then you get special provisions made for you. So, definitely. And your own legal system is allowed to be prioritized. So, yeah, it's very concerning. That it's quite worrying.
I mean, the other thing, like the police and the courts have been more outspoken against FGM, female genital mutilation, but there are still very, very few cases whereby somebody is prosecuted, and a lot of times what happens is the girls are taken outside of the UK for it to be done, and in that time they'll also get married off to their arranged partners, but. So I find it really funny that they're not okay with that bit, but there's other parts where either things are given a free pass, or there's kind of a blind eye turned, especially with these these grooming gangs, where the police did not want to appear to be racist because it was more hassle than it was worth. And if you continue going down that line, there's going to be a point where you can't come back from the brink. It's the same with migration. Some of the European countries, I would say, are approaching or have already passed the point of return, whereby if they decided to suddenly go harsh, actually start upholding the law as should be done, it'd be too late.
Well, I think that's a problem, definitely a problem here, because even if we said no more concessions and we're going to stop the flow of injustice here, we've still got. I mean, if we carried on doing what we're doing now for eternity, we've still got the fact that, like you said, grooming gangs are going uninvestigated, and there is already a two-tier system enshrined in law. So you've either got to go back to a point in time a long way in the past, or that's it, or you are past the point of no return. So in legal terms, that's quite concerning. I hope that, I mean, with the FGM cases, I get the impression that that's seen as more of a soft target for the state to say we're doing something, because the usual culprits of that tend to be Africans, don't they?
It is more of a common thing in Africa. I think it's almost cultural as well as religious. So yeah, they can kind of use that as a beacon for their tackling of these traditions which are viewed to be barbaric in the eyes of the law.
Yeah, so, and I think it's easier for them to go down that route than it is to, say, target the grooming gangs who are mostly Pakistani, and that community especially tends to make more noise. So I think it's mostly just cowardice on the part of the politicians, because they'll take a calculated risk and say, well, we can appease the right wingers, or the whatever they call us, by going after FGM, and hopefully they won't notice that we're not doing anything else. So I get the impression there's a bit of that going on with there.
Yeah, and it's the same with criticizing of religions. The reason Christians are generally made fun of and criticized is because, in general, most Christians will just, as the phrase goes in the Bible, turn the other cheek. They don't get riled. They don't, protest about the fact that they are being used as a scapegoat or being used as a criticism post. And generally, the people don't criticize the Jewish law because of the Jewish religion, because of the links to anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. So yeah. Christianity has never really had any kind of, mass persecution in our kind of last couple of generations, and therefore it's okay to criticize. The last time that Christians were being slaughtered, in huge amounts, was probably that would have been widely covered or widely agreed against, would have been the Crusades, where it was Western Christians were being killed. Now, Christians are being persecuted in China, in various African countries. They are being persecuted, but it doesn't hit our media because it's not in the Western civilization. But people can criticize Christianity because the people of the Christian faith generally tend not to get outraged by it, whereas with the satanic verses that were written, and people of that kind of caliber who come out and openly criticize Islam, Charlie Hebdo, the cartoon, whenever there's a criticizing or mocking of Islam, there is mass outrage, and the politicians are absolutely terrified by it.
Yeah, and I think, you can see the contrasts quite clearly already in British politics. So, UKIP or the British National Party before them criticised, and obviously Tommy Robinson now criticise Islam, and they get dragged through the press as if they are destined for the hangman's noose. And then, I know it's not very popular to defend the guy, but Jeremy Corbyn at the moment, some people he may have associated with may have said a few unkind things about Jews, and everybody's in uproar. But Jacob Rees-Mogg is a Catholic member of the Conservative Party, and his religious beliefs, or he is essentially mocked for his religious beliefs and how they influence his politics on a daily basis. But
yeah.
He laughs and he takes it in good humour, and everybody thinks it's all good fun and games. So yeah, there's that. I don't know. I find it incredible that people don't see this, but evidently large numbers of people are still oblivious.
The whole thing, like you mentioned with Jeremy Corbyn, being being viewed as an anti-Semite, and I don't think Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-Semite. I don't think he hates Jews. I think the problem is he is the head of the party, which has become the absolute epitome of identity politics, and the Labour Party is effectively turning in on itself, or the left in the UK in general is turning in on itself by, they can't focus on a greater goal because they're so obsessed with pointing the finger at each other about being racist or bigoted or Islamophobic. And as long as these things are viewed as absolute horrendous things, then you're never going to make any headway in that, and it's going to mean that it's the snake eating its tail when in the Labour Party. I think now that the bottle has been opened, you're never going to get away from this whole identity politics thing as long as the Labour Party uphold it as a beacon. Yeah,
although just thinking more broadly away from the issue of Islam, but more broadly in electoral terms, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, because with every action you get a reaction and the pendulum swings. So, if Labour want to play identity politics, I guess it could work in our favour in the sense that you could see the reaction to that being that more people on the right, whether they're Christians or white or native or whatever identity it is, that we're more sympathetic to, could earn itself a bit more representation. So, yeah, I guess it's a double-edged sword, really, that one. But yeah, I guess the point remains though about we do have that issue where regardless of whether it's the Labour Party or somebody else, but there's certain groups that you can criticise and there's certain groups that you can't criticise, and that's whether that's enshrined in law or the unwritten law that the media upholds, in other words, public opinion, or
what you have is you have the 5 strands of diversity, which currently exist now, and that's what kind of can fall under hate speech. So you've got age, sex, sexual orientation, race and religion. So that's your 5 strands of diversity. And these are the ones that you can effectively be charged for hate crimes right now.
Right.
But the problem is it's really only being used to charge certain people. You don't really hear of you don't hear of almost any cases of racism where somebody who is non-white is charged with being racist towards somebody who is white. You don't hear of somebody, now I don't know if it happens, but you don't hear of somebody who is not a straight person being charged for the hatred of a straight person. That may be because it's not happening, but I know that there are cases where white people are effectively racially abused by ethnic minorities because they're white, and that is racism, and it falls under the terms in law right now of hate speech, but nothing is being done about it.
Yeah, and I think I know what you mean, and I'm sure because it is happening, and you look at you can see the double standard in that when I can't remember her name now, but there was that woman, and she works for a university or something or other, and she tweeted something about kill all white people, and if a white person in this country tweets that about the black race or about the Jewish race, then they are straight in the slammer. But this woman, she kept her job and everything. She didn't even lose her job. And they said, oh, well, it's free speech. All of the things that we say. And they say, oh, well, it's free speech. So I think...
I was going to say, you've got the example in the States right now, which is in all of Twitter and all over news headlines. The lassie who was hired by the New York Times, Sarah Jung, her tweets have been dug up from 2013 and 14, and it is openly, hatred towards white people and white people alone. And only today on Twitter, the female Candace Owens, she's a kind of right-wing activist who is a black woman. What she did as a social experiment was she took the tweets that Sarah Jung had had posted on Twitter and replaced the word white with either black or Jewish, and was instantly suspended from Twitter for it, for hateful wording. okay, it's not in the UK, but it is again this double standard where you apparently cannot be hateful towards a certain group of people, but as soon as you are hateful or either hateful or point out this fact, you're immediately silenced and viewed as a bigot.
Yeah, because I mean, you don't even have to be hateful. You can just speak some uncomfortable truths, and then you will be
silenced.
You'll be silenced, and whether that's, in America you'll be deplatformed and lose your job, or in this country where you will literally be charged with a criminal offence and most likely given at least a suspended jail term. So yeah, it's a really dire situation for freedom of thought and freedom of speech in this country and in the Anglosphere. So yeah, I mean, in terms of Tommy Robinson and the Sharia Courts, I guess we'll watch this space, but yeah, it could be some interesting developments. I was going to say, have you got a final thing to say about that?
Yeah, all I was going to say is I hope this latest stint in jail for Tommy doesn't kind of turn him off his activism, because he was so passionate before he was arrested. And then when he was on, I watched the Tucker Carlson interview. It's only like 8 minutes long, or 6 or 8 minutes long, but you could see Tommy seemed to be quite shaken. He sounded quite emotional in the interview, so it's obviously still hurting him what he has been through. I imagine he'll bounce back. I imagine he's going to pull through, but it's obviously something that really got him down, and I think he really was fearing for his life whilst he was in prison. So hopefully this doesn't put a dampener on his spirits.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to imagine what it must have been like in his position. So I think a bit of I mean, if he is a bit traumatized, if that's maybe too strong a word, but if he is a bit traumatized, then I think it's quite understandable. And yeah, the hope, of course, is that he bounces back and he continues doing what he's doing, because he's bringing a lot of people over to his side, people who wouldn't normally have gone near him with a barge pole a few years ago. So yeah, we definitely hope that he recovers and gets back on the horse, as it were. Yeah, so anyway, Darth, thanks for coming on and chatting with me about this. It's been good, and I hope we've illuminated a couple of these issues to some of the listeners who might not have been familiar before. And with that, we'll see you next time.
Okay, speak to you later.